Welcome to a brand new episode of the All Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman, joined as always by co-host, producer to the stars, a man who wears many hats, Chris Brito. We're discussing our takeaways from the first 3 weeks of the NBA season, who is better than we expected, who's in a little bit of trouble, a new segment called The Panic Scale coming up. But first, Chris, how are you?
Hey, buddy. Our Knicks have gone to a nice start, 5-3 right now. We're around 10% of the season. And, there are a lot of promising signs. Let's start with RJ Barrett, who's been killing it offensively, playing much better defensively. And, after this first set of games, how do you feel about the team right now?
Yeah, you know what, Chris? I surprisingly feel good. I think this is a team that offensively, they're a lot better than we thought. And defensively, they've been worse than we thought. And I'm in the belief that we talked about this before the show, that Tom Thibodeau can get these guys to be better defensively as the year goes on. He did it last year. I think he could do it again this year. You could teach guys how to be defensive-minded players who can just kind of stay in front of people. I'm not saying they're going to be a top 3 defense in the league like they were last year, but I think they could be above average. Whereas offensively, he can't really teach guys how to make shots. Guys have made shots this year. Barrett's been killing it. That's been super encouraging. And I'm in the belief that, if the offense can continue this, I think you'll even get more out of Randall, efficiency-wise, that this team is in a pretty decent spot to kind of cruise their way to minimum play-in games.
The thing with RJ that has been so encouraging has been the way he's been shooting the ball, right? He's been killing it from three-pointer and from the three-point range and really carrying the team in spurts now, multiple games. We saw it with the Pelicans, we saw it with the Pacers, and the Raptors as well. And to see this side of RJ is probably if nothing else in this season goes right, but RJ takes a step up, I think that's a signal that we're on the right track. Because the East is much improved from top to bottom. And RJ, I think, RJ and potentially Randall are the true cornerstones of this franchise at the moment. And if RJ, some people were saying, even our buddy Sebs loves telling us that he's on the Jimmy Butler trajectory. I think that's as good as we've hoped for in terms of his potential.
Yeah, it's just super encouraging, especially considering how upset we all were when the Knicks did not get that number 1 pick, did not get Zion Williamson. We'll get to New Orleans and Zion in a couple of minutes, but Chris Barrett's been great. He's been guarding the best player on every team. I think he's scoring, 20 plus a night. He had 35 the other night in New Orleans. It's just super encouraging because, your 21-year-old emerging star is here, and he's going to be here for a long time. They can give him the big extension this summer. They can wait a summer. Either way, they're in a good position with RJ Barrett. Just don't trade him.
Yeah, I think right now he's my one untouchable, even if it's for Dame. I can't believe
you're
I'm
not getting
that.
Dame without him, for sure. You're not.
Then I don't want Dame. Sorry.
All right. That's a topic for another day as well. Chris, let's get to a new segment I'm very excited about. I'm calling it the Panic Scale. And we're going to take a bunch of teams that have kind of struggled to start the season, and we're going to give them a rating, 1 to 10. 1 means you're not concerned, move on. 10 means pull every fire alarm. It's time to start screaming and running around in a circle. Let's start with the Detroit Pistons. They're on this list. Yes, they're rebuilding, but Cade Cunningham is back. He played 2 games. He's been very, very bad. It's only 2 games, but he's shooting 13%. What do you think? 1 to 10.
I'm not worried about it. I think all rookies are allowed to have an adjustment process. Look at Obi. We waited a whole year to really see him do a lot, and then really it was the playoffs where he shined. And I think the same should apply for Cade. I think inheriting the franchise of a struggling team is never easy, considering he doesn't have a lot of great pieces, even though a few weeks ago I said he had okay pieces. You just got to give him time. I'm not concerned. I think I'd probably rate it as a 3.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. It's been 2 games. I'm going to put it at a 4. I think, rookie point guard, it's always a little bit more of an adjustment for a lot of these guys. What I'm discouraged by is, Jeremy Grant, who had a really big year. He has not been as good this season. I was really bullish on Killian Hayes, just hearing about, all these different reporters telling me things I wanted to hear about him as a guy who could be a lead guard on a team, and he's been almost unplayable. So I would say a little higher than you just because of the fact that those guys are not performing, but I'm not too concerned about Cunningham just yet. Next team, I think we're both a little more concerned about this one, the New Orleans Pelicans.
Okay, so I'm probably at around an 8. I watched the game they play against the Hawks, and I thought, the Pelicans are going to struggle a lot this year, and they will continue to struggle. They seem to be playing hard for their coach. I'm impressed with Ingram, but everything else is just a situation where you can't win. And I think the situation with Zion is really interesting. And there was a conversation about it on The Ringer about how Zion really needs to get his stuff in order to be back on the playing field. Granted, he's injured, so that stuff needs to be figured out first. But, we're all assuming that Zion is just going to get his bag, right? And so as a franchise, can you really feel confident in giving him that money if he hasn't proven that there's that commitment from him, right?
Yeah, I'm putting it at 12, Chris. I think this is the biggest concern in the entire sport right now. You saw Zion kind of waddling around the court. TNT is making jokes. Chuck is talking about Zion moving around like he looks like him and Shaq had a baby. And it's just it's a big concern because, he's so young and he's got so much promise and we've seen him dominate. But Chris, I don't know when he's coming back. And the injury he had is not a 2, 3, 4 week injury. This is a Jones fracture that Kevin Durant out for the entire season.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry has that injury in football. He's probably not coming back this season in a much tougher sport, right? So it's if you don't have him for most of the season, let's look around to this rest of this group. Brandon Ingram's awesome. He's averaging 25 a game. Other than him, what do they really have? Devontae Graham, they gave a first-round pick for. He's a career 37% shooter. I love him because he's a Jayhawk, but to me, he's a backup point guard. He's a 37% career shooter from the floor. This year, he's shooting 37%. Nickeil Alexander-Walker's another guy who I've kind of liked. He's shooting 35%. These are not guys, with high efficiency in their track record. So I don't really know where they go from here because everything seems to be going wrong. And every move that David Griffin seems to have made so far has been nothing short of a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, look at the whole center situation. He traded for Steven Adams and had to get rid of him. It's just a really concerning situation with the Pelicans because amid all the basketball reasons why, there's also been the rumors that they want to, relocate that franchise to another place. And so the Pelicans right now need to do a lot of soul searching. What's the real identity of this team? Are you guys building around Zion? A lot could be said about the Pelicans, but right now that team is basically in shambles. And if they didn't have Ingram, I'd be even more worried about that. The panic scale would probably be at 100.
Yeah, I mean, they're 1-8, Chris. It's the worst record in basketball. So the only person who should not be panicking about their situation is me for taking the under 39.5 wins before the season. Good job there.
That was smart.
All right, moving on. Next team, the Boston Celtics. Marcus Smart called out Tatum and Brown, basically saying we got to teach them how to pass. They all had a big team meeting in Orlando. Their record isn't awful, but at the same time, they haven't played well. What do you think?
So here's what I've always been concerned about with the Celtics. The conversation about whether Tatum and Jaylen Brown fit together has always been a big question mark, right? We know about the Embiid and Simmons ordeal. Now this ordeal, which seemingly you would think that those two are together, those who kind of complement each other, and in some ways they really do, has fallen short this year. And you would expect this team, as talented as they are, would have made strides to be on a higher level in the Eastern Conference, are just not showing it right now. And I think a lot of it has been effort, and that's like the worst thing. It's only been 8 games into the season, and there are concerns about effort. I think that's a big warning sign that, either they don't like playing with each other, they're out just to get their numbers, and there seems to be a really big disconnect between the two best players on the team and everyone else, or between each other, because one of these things, these things are not going right. Even though they had an impressive win against the Magic, the Magic aren't a great team, even though the Knicks also lost to them. It's really hard to put a finger on what exactly it is, but it really starts with your two best players, right? If they're putting up numbers, but the team is still losing, maybe there has to be more sacrifice.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's interesting that Marcus Smart's the one calling them out about passing when he's the point guard. He's the one who's supposed to be getting everybody involved, right? But the bottom line is,
but is he the point guard though? Tatum
kind of.
Tatum handles the ball a lot.
Yes. I mean, what they really need a real point guard. That's what they need.
Do. Yeah.
Because Tatum and Brown are awesome two-way wings that every team in the league is always looking for a two-way wing. But they're not guys who initiate offense. They're the guys who create their own shot. They're not really creating for others. And eventually you hope that those guys can learn how to do that, but that's how you go from being all-star players to MVP candidates, right?
Yeah.
And they're in their early 20s. It's asking a whole lot for those guys to do that at this stage of their career. And I think they just got to go find themselves a point guard. Like, can you call Cleveland when they're out of it in 6 months, 3 months, and see if you could steal Ricky Rubio? It's just somebody who just passes the ball. You don't need some all-star point guard. You just need a guy who can initiate an offense. And I think that will really change everything for this team. So I'm not too worried. I think they're going to struggle for a bit, but I'm going to give it a 2.
I'm probably going to give it. I mean, listen, they have a lot more talent than a lot of other teams in the NBA. So I think I'm going to probably put it at a 4. I think these next couple of weeks will be very telling to see whether this team is for real or not. But I'm happy that there was a lot of talk about getting them on the over. I think they were at 45 wins this season. I'm glad I didn't take that. I'm happy I didn't.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where they're going to settle at. It just comes down to, what does this team look like, a few months from now? I don't think it's going to look completely the same. The Schroeder experiment hasn't really worked so far. They gave Marcus Smart a lot of money, and so far all he's done is not shoot well and critique the team's two best players. So we'll have to see how all that plays out. Chris, next team, you brought them up before. It's the Orlando Magic. And I want to talk about, Jalen Suggs. He's only shooting 30% from the floor. They've gotten a lot more out of Cole Anthony than you thought. You saw him light it up at the Garden a few weeks ago. What do you think?
So with the Magic, I think it's a mostly young roster. I think they're trying to see how those pieces are still fitting in together. And I think Suggs is obviously going to be a big component moving forward. And with Cole, it's obviously encouraging that he's playing really well. But if the team is being led by Cole Anthony, I'm not sure if that is a signal for success necessarily. No disrespect to Cole Anthony, obviously. It's just that this team has a lot of holes, and right now I don't see them being addressed. And moving forward, I think the Orlando
What
Magic,
are those holes? Just so obviously they have a lot of young players, but nothing seems to be going well.
Let's start with leadership, and let's start with they have a lot of nice young pieces, right? You have the Wendell Carters, you have obviously the two guys we just mentioned, and just figuring out how to navigate the ins and outs of the NBA. That's why it's so encouraging to see Cole Anthony playing well, but we need the other players to step up as well. So the expectations for the Magic weren't that high to begin with, so my panic level isn't going to be really high. This is what we expected to happen, so I'm probably going to go at a 4 or 5, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go with a 4. I think, Suggs needs to play better for this team to have, total confidence going into the year. But at the end of the day, this is a group that's playing for ping pong balls. If you tell me, Cole Anthony joins Suggs and Isaac as, players of the future here. I think that's a bonus considering the year they had. So I'm going to give it a 4. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done. This is a team that is in the early stages of a rebuild, obviously. So you hope you just find some pieces. They have some interesting guys, guys we all like. I like Wendell Carter. I'm just not sure which of these guys is a keeper, and there's really no reason to panic because you're trying to figure those things out this year.
It kind of reminds me of that Knicks team from a few years ago where we had Kevin Knox in the starting lineup, Alonzo Trier, kind of just like throwing all these young guys you have.
Let's hope it works out for Orlando a little better
obviously,
than it did for those Knicks. But last year, this was a group that wouldn't play the young players. They were starting Michael Carter Williams,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they were like, all right, let's get rid of the coach. Let's trade all of our starters, Fournier, Vucevic, Gordon. They're all gone. And now they're basically by default, they're starting all these young players. And I think that's the right way to go.
Right. And I do recognize that with the comparison. Clearly it didn't go well for us, but that eventually helped us land RJ Barrett. And I think the Magic, they're a really young roster, and it just kind of is part of the growing pains.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, last team on our panic list here, the Los Angeles Lakers. They've been very up and down, injuries, and then Russell Westbrook with his quadruple double. What's your panic scale here?
I think I'm going to go with a 7 here, mostly because this is a team with championship expectations, and a lot of the concerns that were talked about heading into the season, like, whether they have enough shooting, whether Russ could fit with LeBron and AD. These are all concerns that we're seeing play out right now, right? And Anthony Davis hasn't been as sharp on defense like he usually is. And I think that if you're a team like the Lakers, it's still really early though, and they obviously will find a way to make things better. And who knows, maybe the Lakers roster isn't completely done right now. But LeBron James is going to miss a week with, I believe, an abdominal strain. So it'll be really telling these next few games to see how Russ and AD begin to figure it out. Because I think as the season goes along, LeBron's only going to play less, not more. Less in the sense of he's going to miss games because, he's an older player. So it'll be really important for Russ and AD to really get that camaraderie going on the court, I think. So for me, the panic scale is what I said, 7.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned. I'm going to put it at a 5. We've seen Russell Westbrook kind of do this in all the stops, and then the team kind of figures out how to play with him as the year goes on, right? And this is a team with championship aspirations where if this isn't working, I can see them saying to Russ, okay, you're going to be our 6th man. And that might hurt his confidence. That might make him angry, but he'll be a heck of a 6th man if they put him in that role. I don't think that's last case resort, right? But I'm thinking there are options here if this continues to not work with the 3 of them. And if you look at it right now, it's kind of surprising where all 3 of them are averaging more shot attempts than they did last year. And you kind of thought they'd have to, do a little less. But really the only people who are being hurt by this are the role guys. And the role guys are a lot different than they were last year. KCP is gone, Kuzma's gone, Caruso's gone. So it's a new supporting cast, and how that supporting cast improves as the year goes on is going to be really key, because if they do, great. And if they don't, they're going to be replaced with buyout guys.
But who are those supporting guys that need to step up in your view? Because I don't see Malik Monk really having a big role on this team. I don't see DeAndre Jordan either. Those 2 guys seem like 2 guys will probably be out of that Lakers roster before the year ends.
Yeah, I mean, it starts to me with Horton Tucker, who, I believe in, they believe in. They kind of picked him over Caruso to pay money to. They gave him a pretty sizable contract. It was a smaller contract than I thought he was going to get, but he still got a pretty big bag. It comes down to, can he become a reliable role player for this team? Really the only young player that they've developed left on this group, right? And then I'm not done with Malik Monk. He had pretty good second half in Charlotte. I think he's a spot up shooter who can help, and I wouldn't put him in the DeAndre Jordan category because, he's like 25 and he's shown flashes of being a very good starting two guard. So I think I don't see why he couldn't be KCP at the very least.
Starting point guard, a starting guard for the Lakers right now on this current roster.
Well, he is, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not asking him to put up starting two guard numbers. I'm asking him to be a solid seventh guy on the roster, which I think.
I just think that with someone like Malik Monk, he's so short that he's not a KCP though. Because KCP was at least a wing defender and a 3-point shooter. Malik Monk is at times a good 3-point shooter, but then I don't know. I don't think you can.
Monk's issue right now is he's not hitting shots. I mean, he's shooting 36% from the floor. For the year, which, again, it's a short sample size, 8 games, right? But they need more out of him. They need more out of Horton Tucker. And then most likely they're going to be looking at the buyout market and the trade market for more help.
Yeah. I mean, they need a lot of help, but yeah.
And we've also seen flashes from Carmelo, who keeps reminding us
Carmelo
that he's still
has been amazing. That I can't believe I forgot about him, but yes, Carmelo Anthony has been he has been a godsend for that Lakers team.
He's shooting 52% from the floor, back up to 16.5 points per game. It's pretty cool to see. I'm hoping that continues and he gets that ring.
And potentially a 6th Man of the Year award.
That would be pretty cool for sure. I would
remember
last
last
year. I thought that was the dumbest pick you've ever made, and you might be right a year later. But that was really awesome. Really happy to see that. That is our panic teams right there. We'll do that again in a month or so. But Chris, let's get to our final thoughts right after this. Okay, Chris, final thoughts time. Your Miami Heat are crushing a number 1 seed in the East right now. What's going right here?
My Miami Heat.
You wanted to bring them up.
Well, the Heat to me have just figured right now seem like a fine-tuned machine at 8-7 games into the season. They've not only played great on defense so far, they're one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, but they're really figuring it out on offense. And I think having a real point guard like Kyle Lowry just helps. Say what you want about this 35-year-old or however old he is, but he has been really helping with the pace with this team. And I think that for them to look so good so early, I think if you're a team in the East, you should be scared. I think if you're the Bucks, you should be scared. I think if you're the Nets, you should be scared. I think if you're the Knicks, you should be scared. I think the Heat just have, with the emergence of Tyler Hero again, emergence, right? He's has seemed to find his footing. And now he's added some playmaking to his repertoire. And I think moving forward, I think that was the best way for him to develop and become a vital piece to this Heat roster. And
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and nothing. I just think that as a Heat fan, you probably feel a little bit of vindication for staying loyal to him instead of trading him, like you could have.
Yeah, and Tyler Hero is a guy who before the season said I put myself in the class of Luka Doncic and Trae Young, and we all kind of laughed. Well, he's averaging the same number of points per game as those two guys right now, which is kind of insane to think about, right? And you brought up Kyle Lowry, who, has been a great point guard for this team, averaging 7 assists a game, but his points has just not been there. So the fact is
but I don't think you need points from him, really. I think you needed the defense, you need him to set up your offense, and
right.
And that's it.
But I'm saying you're going to get more out of him to me as the year goes on. So this Heat team could actually get even better than it's been so far. He's only averaging 10 points a game. I don't see that staying like that the whole year. So this Heat team could actually improve as the year goes on. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, we didn't even mention them. 2 all-star players. Duncan Robinson got paid. This team is pretty loaded. And by the way, you have the best coach in the NBA. So I don't see why this team can't win the number 1 seed. That's not meaning that they're their number 1 team in the East, but the Heat have never taken a day off in as long as I've seen them play. So I think this is a group that could very well take that number 1 seed and really make another long run in the NBA playoffs.
I don't think it's just a long run. I think this team could be, depending on how the next few months go, I think this is an NBA contender. I mean, you could argue the Bucks have looked sluggish, but they've had injured players to start. The Nets, will Kevin Durant be healthy for the rest of the season? Who knows? James Harden is another question mark. Kyrie Irving is an even bigger question mark. The Knicks are figuring it out. Like, I don't know. I feel like Miami is like a very, tempting team to put money on to win the championship.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting there, right? And they still have future picks going on, so they could actually make another move at the deadline and bring in more help as well. Last story here. Obviously there's more talk about what's going to happen with Robert Sarver, the ESPN allegations of, sexist and racist remarks that he's been doing for the last 17 years. And, we've heard stuff like this before about that organization, but never to this degree, never in this much detail. How do you see this playing out, Chris?
Well, the first thing, the NBA has to get involved, and obviously they'll launch their own independent investigation, A, and then B, I see it's just tough. I think to compare it with the Clipper situation, it's like the same shade, right? Like, obviously the owner in that situation was caught on audio, and now there's dozens of people making these allegations against Robert Sarver. So it's pretty damning. Even if it's just one person, it's too many. And so I read some of the report today, and it was just like so disheartening to see so many employees come out against your boss, right? I'm curious to see what leaders like Chris Paul and Devin Booker do, but they're in a very tough spot, right? With someone like that in obviously taking the reins. Like, I think eventually, if the NBA, I mean, hopefully they do their due diligence, maybe they'll remove him. I think that makes the most sense if he's in fact guilty of all these things, but 70 people coming out, that's pretty damning. So
yeah, no, I think that's a great point there. And in these stories, they would talk to somebody, right? They would give them the story, and then they talk to somebody else, and they would give them a very similar or the same story. So it's like, it seems like this definitely happened to some degree. And I think if there was that audio component, as there was last time, he would be gone for sure. I think the way it works here is it's just so hard to remove an NBA owner that they're going to have to find proof. They're going to have to find definitive email proof, video proof, some kind of proof to get him out of there. But either way, I hope everybody in that Suns organization feels a little better knowing that their story was told today, and that I hope things improve in that organization going forward, because there's just no place for that in this amazing basketball league, for sure, for one. And two, it's 2021. It's time to get all these clowns out of here who are doing stuff like that.
Then, I'll be honest with you, I'm surprised it really took this long for a story like that to come to the surface. I mean, how many people have been in power in that organization that just could not speak out, or
who still can't speak out? There's a lot of people who still can't
speak out, right? Like, anyway, I hope the resolution comes sooner faster than later. You wonder how that impacts the morale of the organization, the team, and all those things. To have your leader really be like, in the middle of all these allegations, and like, who's a sexist and a racist, like,
Yeah, the whole thing was just shocking. And, it was, from a funnier point of view from that story, it was crazy to see him go into the locker room, right, and try to draw plays. And they're like, we can't do a pick and roll in the paint. That's not how 3 seconds work. And like having him try to actually coach the team was funny to me, and what was a very dark story, obviously. So you're hoping that everything works out the way it's supposed to from this, if it is true, and that the Suns can find a better leadership going forward. And, maybe it's a sign, because I'm sure he's not the only one in professional sports to be doing stuff like this. And I'm hoping other people read the story and be like, wow, I might have been guilty of one or two of these kind of similar situations. I'm going to, get my act in order. And I'm hoping it's a sign for a lot of people who have done similar things to say, okay, it's time to grow up and get with the times.
Yeah, I agree, Steve.
All right, well,
on a lighter note, the Knicks play the Bucks on Friday, and the Knicks, some of the players have been talking about how the Bucks model of how they built their championship team is something how they want to emulate. And I just want to say that I like the way the Knicks are thinking about, raising their expectations, and I think everyone loves the way the Bucks did it, right? Like
Sure.
they didn't, Giannis didn't really play with two superstars, even though Drew Holiday and Middleton are stars. But that being said, I love that the Knicks are, already setting the bar high, and I like that.
Yeah, and I think the Knicks can get there too someday, especially if they're able to pry Giannis away from the Bucks for nothing. So that's going to do it for us here on the All Hoops podcast. Chris, thank you for joining me as always. Always a great time talking basketball with you. Remember to follow us on our brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe. We're going to have plenty more content coming as the season goes along. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you know where to go. I'm going to be back next week to talk more NBA basketball.
Bye, everyone.